Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles and Brian McElfresh.
Hey everybody, how you doing out there? This is Matt Knowles and Brian McElfresh. We are here with the CFB Dynasty Podcast for week two going into week 3 of the college football season. Both BMAC and I have a lot of thoughts about what happened last week in college fantasy football and college football overall. We both feel way differently about our college football teams after last week, and we're going to start right there. BMAC, tell us how you feel about the Florida Gator performance last week.
What a terrible place to start. So Richardson obviously looked like a different quarterback. Just wasn't clicking at all. I really felt good when we were up 16-7. You know, you start kind of playing things along in your head. It's like, all right, we've got the ball. We're up 16-7. They can't run it on us. Feeling great about this. You know, we got USF next week, and then maybe we can get one on the road at Tennessee week 4, and we'll be 4-0 to start the season, and not a lot of people saw that coming. But play out the rest of that game, and you feel way differently. So felt like Richardson was probably just pressing, you know, a bunch of NFL scouts there, and that was well known for that quarterback matchup. And Florida just ended up not being able to move the ball. The defense was way better, but anyways, running backs looked good, O-line looked good, just Richardson was just off. So definitely needed a good 24-hour recovery period afterwards, because you know, you get teased there when you're winning. You're starting to think ahead a little bit as a fan, but I'm still alive. So.
Well, I was at Daytona Beach Comic-Con last week, and luckily I had my tablet right there with me and was able to, right there at the booth, I watched my entire NC State Charleston Southern game. Absolutely the game that my boys needed after the needing East Carolina to basically hand them the game in week 1. Devin Leary showed that he was the quarterback that we all kind of hoped that he would be. 6 touchdowns, 4 passing, 2 rushing. And in the preseason, I talked about the running back core for NC State, Jordan Houston and Demi Sumo Carnier. Sumo is going to be probably the man. He is a power runner, and he's somebody people need to keep their eyes on. I'm glad to see that's going to be the strength of the team. I think it's going to be kind of like the last couple of years where there's not really going to be a receiver that's going to be somebody you really want to have on your squad other than Thayer Thomas at this point, because you have so many guys that are just going to pop here and there. But I was really glad we really needed that. Got a tough test in Texas Tech this week. This should be a barn burner of a game, having high-powered offenses on both sides and great defense from NC State. So hopefully we can start 3-0 and we can start having those thoughts like you were talking about.
Yeah, 100%.
But enough about that. People are here to listen to our thoughts on the news and notes in college fantasy, and then also what the our rankings are. They want to get to that week 3 BMAC's brisket lock, and we have a bunch of other cool stuff for you. So BMAC, what do you think about going straight to the news and notes?
News and notes.
All right. Tyler Buchner, Notre Dame, he is out for a good pretty much rest of the season, and Drew Pine's going to take over at quarterback there for Notre Dame, who's been totally disappointing. If you've invested in any Notre Dame players for your fantasy team, it's just not looking good. Not a great start. We'll see if their recruiting continues.
No offense to Marshall, but my goodness gracious, being in South Bend this week has probably been really rough. If it wasn't for some of the other upsets in college football, all eyes would be on Notre Dame right now. Luckily, there's been a lot of other things that have happened that have taken some eyes off of South Bend. But that is a brutal loss for Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, quarterback for UCLA. He was available to practice. So he left the game early in the blowout last week, but seems like he should be good. Zach Charbonnet was, quote, unavailable last week, even after dressing out, just didn't play, probably because of the outmatched opponent. Should be available this week, so we'll see. And Texas, that epic game against Alabama, which I was totally fooled, by the way. I was driving home, saw my Bleacher Report app alert, and I thought I read Texas takes down Alabama, but it was the opposite because I had to glance at it really quick. So when I was watching the end of that game, I was like, oh crap, the Bleacher Report app got me, and I was like 2 or 3 minutes behind. It's like, wow, how's Alabama going to miss this little short last kick? And then they didn't miss it. And then I was like, oh, I read that wrong.
As an SEC fan, I know you're bummed about the Gators and their outcome this past week, but that's got to give you guys some hope that it took Alabama to the very end of the game against a backup quarterback, a team that was not at full strength, to squeak out the win. I mean, that's very un-Alabama-like.
Yeah, people are questioning the O-line there. They're questioning the wide receivers. But a lot of the Alabama fans are questioning the OC. And they just think they've got the talent, which it's hard to doubt that they don't have the talent. So we'll see if they can get receivers open. This week, I'd expect Bama to have a beatdown. But, man, if it's not, they do have some help coming in, I think, the beginning of October. A couple receivers coming back, but yikes. Anyways, we're mentioning Texas because of the injuries there. So Quinn Ewers out, Hudson Card out. Hudson Card finished the game. He's not necessarily out. They're calling him, both of them, day to day because they don't need surgery. But Ewers is pretty much expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Hudson Card might play. Apparently, Malik Murphy is not healthy and not able to play yet either. So it's basically down to an injured Hudson Card or Charles Wright to make his first college football start against a good UTSA team. So a couple things to note with those injuries. It doesn't make me feel good about Xavier Worthy, although, early in that game against Alabama, I was just thinking to myself or making notes you can never sit Xavier Worthy. He is so good. Just start him no matter who they're playing. But if the quarterback isn't great, you kind of think about Roschon Johnson, right, who used to be a quarterback, and then potentially running a lot more Wildcat. But quite honestly, you think about Bijan Robinson, and he will probably have his best game of the year this week, or you would hope they're challenging that O-line and gonna ride him pretty heavily.
I would love to see Roschon get some more action. I feel like he's one of the most underused players out there in college football. The versatility that's out there, I've been hoping that he could do something. I've stashed him in all of my college leagues, hoping that he'll be able to do something. He'll have that one game where he blows up and then he just fades back and is unused. But this may be the opportunity for them to get creative and get him back out there on the field.
Sleeper start this week. I don't feel good about it. He's not in our top 50 or anything for running back starts. But if you really need somebody and he's on a waiver wire in a deep league or something, could be a good option for a sleeper pick there. Definitely a sleeper DFS that we'll go over later this week. So Keaton Slovis still listed as the starter. Pat Narduzzi, among other funny quotes that he had this week, says, "I know nothing about the injury." So is it going to be Nick Patty, who also got banged up? But it seems like Keaton Slovis might be the guy, but there's a little bit of, you feel questionable about that one. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully you've got a better option than Keaton Slovis this week. But some other news. Luke Altmaier for Ole Miss practiced Monday after leaving the game. No starter named yet. And there's an or on the depth chart with Jackson Dart. So we'll see there. Running backs. Donovan Edwards said to be working through something. And that is a quote. Not 100%
What
going
when
into
injury
UConn.
reports are that specific,
It's so dumb. I just can't wait till this is normalized one day, hopefully like the NFL. That's one of the very few things that I hope college football would do like the NFL. John Emery Jr. for LSU. So he's supposed to be ready and eligible to play for his first game of the year following his 2-game suspension. So that's someone to monitor this week. Although it's just the O-line has been so bad for LSU. We'll see how they do against Mississippi State. He's someone that is probably on that borderline of, do you cut him and go after someone else? And I think you can pretty safely make that judgment call after this week unless he only gets like a half a game or something like that. Other news, so Houston, Brandon Campbell is day-to-day. Tajon Henry injured his other ankle, and he's also day-to-day. Neither of those two have been ruled out. All right, Tay McWilliams, questionable after leaving the game. Bijan Robinson, he is day-to-day with a shoulder injury. Chris Rodriguez for Kentucky, he remains suspended. Should be available October 1st game. Trey Siggers for SMU warmed up, didn't play last week due to a groin injury. Kamar Wheaton for SMU didn't play last weekend due to an ankle injury. Both sound minor. Both could potentially play this week, but there's not going to be anything definitive. At Alabama, for receiver, JoJo Earle, Tyler Harrell, still set and hopeful to return October 1st. Let's go down to Florida State. Ontario Wilson, now listed as the sole starter. So that's good for him. He had a good, I think, 25-point fantasy game a couple weeks ago. So someone to monitor, waiver wire potential there. Trey Knox left the game Saturday with an ankle sprain. He was able to fully participate in practice, so he should be good to go this week. Seven McGee for Oregon, expected to return and be ready to play after leaving last Saturday's game. Ryan O'Keefe for UCF, hopeful to play. Not anything definitive there. Adam Randall for Clemson, who was a standout in spring. He's been cleared to play this week because of his knee injury, but he'll be on a rep count. Arian Smith for Georgia, one of the fastest players in college football. He's back and running at practice, not quite ready to return yet. And then lastly, we'll go to Purdue. Brock Thompson only played 6 snaps last week. He's going to be on a snap count again, apparently after tweaking his knee week 1.
Good stuff, good stuff. And then we've also got some little some news and some topics of our own. So let's go. Let's talk about some Rasheen Ali.
Yeah, so he was spotted at practice, pads and helmet on, participating yesterday. There's some images on Twitter, and this is the most reliable news possible, of course, would be Twitter images. But man, that's someone you've got to think about. Like, as we went into the rankings this week, going over, all the data, adding all the Vegas metrics, looking at year-to-date performances and the opponent and all that stuff, we had Kalon Laybourne, who was a former FSU transfer, 4-star recruit. He's been doing really well. He's averaging 23 fantasy points per game, and Marshall should pretty much handle Bowling Green on the road this week. But with Ali potentially coming back, either splitting those carries, or does Ali step right back into his role as the full-time starter and one of the elite fantasy performers? There's ambiguity there, and you just don't really know. So caution for sure on Laybourne versus Ali this week.
And then if you listen to the podcast a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the situation in Nebraska. I made a comment that I'm like, if Scott Frost keeps this up, I don't know if he's going to last the season. And I even said then, it's very rare to see a college coach get dismissed during the season, especially early in the season. I don't think anybody expected that Scott Frost was going to get let go 2 weeks into the season. But there you go, Scott Frost out in Nebraska. BMAC, what do you think about Scott Frost getting dismissed after 2 weeks of a season?
For fantasy purposes, it sucks. Like, if you've drafted any Nebraska players, you just don't know how the players are going to respond, how the team's going to respond. Are they going to mail it in, or are they going to fight and continue to play well, especially as they've had a running back that's kind of taken off for fantasy. But crazy news there. The 7.5 million that they could have saved, like 7.5 million it's a lot of money for anybody, you would think. They could have saved that just by waiting till October 1st and firing him then, but they didn't. So, interesting move. He's got good history there at Nebraska. I imagine that's just them doing him a favor because he's one of their own. But man, that's rough.
The thing that frustrates me is has nothing to do with Nebraska. All it has to do with is the rumor mill. Because as soon as any coaching job comes up, there are certain names that come up every year. Are they going to want to move to Nebraska? You got my coach Dave Dorn at NC State. His name comes up, and they're asking him at a press conference about the game upcoming. And he said, guys, I'm looking forward to coaching my own team. I don't want to talk about something else. Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina. These names come up every single time there's a coaching vacancy, and it just becomes fodder for the rumor mills, distractions for these teams that are just trying to go out there and coach their own squads because they act like Nebraska is Nebraska of the 70s and 80s. It's just a school just like Miami where, it's not elevated at this point like a Clemson or an Alabama.
Yep.
And so it's frustrating the teams can't just go out there and coach and try to get their own playoff appearance. They got to worry about this team over here that fired their coach 2 weeks in. So that's what's frustrating to me.
Yeah, it does suck. Last bit of news here. Jackson Smith and Jigba could be good to go this week against Toledo. They've got a huge spread. He's listed as our top Ohio State start at receiver just because of how great he is. If he's playing, he's basically a must start. Is he going to be on a snap count? Of course, we'll never know going into the game. Will he actually play? We don't know, but with the news that he is potentially available, he's ranked high for us this week.
All right, so next note you got on here, you want to talk about Kent State. So let's talk about Kent State. Why is Kent State on your mind?
So just Kent State as an example here. So a lot of these teams, like Kent State, have had difficult schedules week 1 and week 2, and these players are getting ready to either this week for Kent State or next week, these group of 5 teams as they go into conference play, they're getting ready to bust out as far as fantasy purposes go. So if you're in one of those leagues where you're playing with a bunch of your buddies and it's top heavy for, Power 5 schools, now's the time to go in and grab some waiver wire pickups for, players like, Colin Schlee at Kent State, who might be averaging 12 points a game. But, if you look at
Dante Cephas as well, for sure.
Yeah, if you look at their schedule so far, they've played on the road at Washington. They went on the road at Oklahoma. And then they play Long Island at home this week. So that's why you'll see some Kent State players with low points per game in fantasy pretty high in our rankings. And then next week they're at Georgia. What a rough start to the season for Kent State. But this week they get a little bit of a breather. Some of their best players are going to bust out this week. And make sure you've got them. If you don't have them in your lineup, add them to your lineup. If you don't have, or if they're a free agent like Colin Schlee, pick him up. He's averaging 12 fantasy points per game, but yet he's still in our top 15 or so starts for the week this week.
And that's what makes a seasonal CFB so fun, because people are like, oh, I got to go get the Alabama guys. I got to go get, those top end guys. But when you get down to the end of the season, you got Maction, and you got some crazy games that happen in front of 3,000 diehard fans on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. But it makes it tough when you got leagues like we have, where you got a college pro dynasty. You got to be really careful about those guys. They might blow up in college, but they may not have a lot of pro potential. I had 5 wide receivers go to the pros last year, and I think only one of them is even on a pro roster. The rest of them, I think 2 of them are on practice squads. 2 of them didn't even make a practice squad. They couldn't even make a 68-man roster, 69-man roster in the pros, including practice squads. So you got to be very careful about the risk versus reward to try and get a college ship versus pro potential if you're in a college pro dynasty. But if it's college only, heck yeah, jump on those group of 5 players.
Yeah, absolutely. And next week, as we take a quick little peek ahead to week 4, if you look at the schedule, that's when everything kind of returns back to normal. We don't start that Tuesday action quite yet, but we do have Thursday night matchups, which I think the college football just gave to the NFL for the first 2 weekends. And then we've got some good games starting off week 4 on Thursday and Friday. So back to more of a normal schedule in week 4 when we've got, pretty much almost everybody in conference play at that point.
So unless you got something else you want to talk about that, we want to go to a fun segment that BMAC has decided he wants to have in here now. And this segment is called Who We're Mad At. BMAC, who are you mad at?
I'm still upset, and I've got to have some good collaboration with other Kayshon Boutte owners in the Discord. So it feels good to go in there and be mad with other people at the same player, but it's not. It's just he's someone you kind of draft, and then you just expect he's a staple in your lineup. Of course, if you drafted him, you spent a lot on him in the draft because you took him in the first round. Maybe he made it to the second round, top of the second round, whatever. But yeah, he's someone you've got to consider to sit. So I'm going back and forth. All right, I've got Worthy, who's got a backup quarterback, and then I've got Boutte, who's there. The LSU is a mess right now. Didn't even get a touchdown. LSU put up almost 60 points last week. Didn't even get a touchdown last week. So I've been wrong starting him twice, and I just don't know if I can trust him to start him again this week.
Who am I mad at? I'm kind of mad at Fantrax. So you want to know why I'm mad at? I'll tell you a little story about why I'm mad at Fantrax. So Fantrax, for those of you that don't know, and if you play college fantasy football and you don't know who Fantrax is, I want to know where you have your league set up. Fantrax is the leader when it comes to setting up college fantasy football. Great website. They do so many things right. Fantrax this year has added in the ability to go and rank backups. So if you have guys that don't play, there's an automated way to do that. It's one of the worst things about college football overall is that there's not really injury reports. A lot of teams will, game the injury report, and there's no way of knowing. And when you go into a game, and especially when you've got guys can play 4 weeks and still be able to retain their red shirt, guys will just not play for no reason whatsoever, and it can really throw your game. So in a lot of leagues, we'll actually go into whatever our chat system is, and we'll put our backups. Hey, if my wide receiver doesn't play, I want this guy to go in. It's what you have to do to keep integrity in the league. So Fantrax has started to try and do it automated. If you go into your league, you'll see little yellow circles where you can rank players. It's still in beta. They're still trying it out. Hey, that's great. I love the fact they're trying to get it automated. Well, this week, I was at Daytona Beach Comic-Con. 2-day show. I'm there by myself. 8:30 in the morning on Sunday, we realized that their automated system that's in beta completely took a dump. Didn't happen in CFB. It happened in MVP, the other main college one that I have. It started moving out guys that played and had normal days for random bench players. There was one game where a 13-point player got moved onto the bench for a 44-point player. There were games where having the wins and losses were getting changed because the system didn't work. So instead of getting ready for the show, I was working with the other commissioners to try and figure out everything that messed up, getting everything worked out. I ended up having to rush to get over to the show on Sunday morning. I ended up leaving some of my stage clothes in the room. So yes, Fantrax, you inadvertently made me leave stage clothes in a hotel room in Daytona Beach. I have to drive back there on Thursday to get my stuff. Thanks, Fantrax. But in all seriousness, I am glad that Fantrax is trying to make that work, because that is one of the biggest frustrations for all of college fantasy football players, that there is no injury report, and you can see games get decided just because of coaches' gamesmanship. It has nothing to do with you setting your lineup and being a good coach. I mean, you can't know what's in the coach's head if they just want to hold somebody out for gamesmanship purposes. So I'm glad they're trying to make that work. Hopefully this week that issue is resolved.
So some other settings in there, and I was talking with Zach Tao on the live pod we did last week about this, and he uses, we use our not IR spots, where we redshirt our players. What's that spot called?
The minors.
Minors. His league uses the minors for backups, which is pretty interesting, where you can put one per position there. Thought that was just in this scenario where it's like, okay, unnamed suspension or unlisted injury, and the player just sits, and nobody could have figured that out unless they were maybe on Twitter 10 minutes before kickoff, whatever. But you can set a max number of positions, so I just adjusted that in our CFB Dynasty League to 4, so you can do 1 per position. I'll put it at 5 actually because of kickers. But yeah, anyways, that does suck that it didn't work. All right, so you ready for rankings?
You know what, D-Mac? I think I'm ready for rankings. Let's do it, man. All right. So normally on the show, we go and we'll look at the top 5 on CFBDynasty.com. If you are not a subscriber, you will not have access to this. You will just get a place saying this is subscriber only information. So make sure if you are not subscribed to CFBDynasty.com that you go up and get yourself a subscription. What we do on this show is we will go through the top 5 and maybe hit on a couple others, but we don't want to give away the entire list. We want to make sure that you still have an impetus to want to go up there and get the whole list every week. So we're going to start with quarterbacks. BMAC, let's go to your top 5 quarterbacks for this week's rankings.
Yep, and these were posted this morning. I posted that in the Discord. We'll put it up on Twitter later, but yeah, for quarterbacks. So we've got all the data here. We've added a couple columns in the spreadsheet. So if you're on like a mobile device, you'll just see the player and their rank. But if you click the little plus sign, you'll get all the information there. So we've got the fantasy points, total fantasy points updated. We've got fantasy points per game. But the addition is how many weekly points you get. So we've got W1 for week 1, how many points they got in week 1, and then W2 for week 2, how many points they got in week 2. In addition to the spread, the over-under, projected team points, projected opponent points. So the week 1, week 2 basically allows us to kind of spot trends, and those are really important. You don't want to, in a league where you have potentially limited waiver wire pickups, or maybe you've got like a salary cap set up where you don't want to use, 20% of your cap on someone that just caught 2 long touchdowns, and that was 2 of his 4 targets, and just had an anomaly game there. So in this scenario, we've only got 2 weeks. We typically leave the trailing 3 weeks. Okay. So like in week 9, you'll see weeks 8, 7, and 6. So you can see the most recent 3 weeks in there. We don't want to add it all the way out, but if you guys request it and you just want to see the whole week or every week in one, that'll be a totally different page, but that's something we can build and provide for subscribers, and could be some good information as you're looking at trends there. So number 1, we've got CJ Stroud. We called it last week. We figured Ohio State was going to really want to get their passing attack going, and that was a little bit to the detriment of the running backs in terms of fantasy performance. Still more of a split than I would have expected going into the season, with TreVeyon Henderson, not up there even in our top 10 running backs again this week. So Stroud against Toledo, there's no spread. They're just expected to crush Toledo, and he gets his top receiver back potentially this week. Love CJ Stroud there. And then at number 2,
yep. Yeah, so if you look at your top 5, and as we're going through, the top 5 are all top-end Power 5 quarterbacks this week. But you got to look at who they're playing. Mm-hmm. Every one of them is playing, I don't want to call them a cupcake game, I don't want to say a money game, but most of them pretty much are playing money games this week. And that's why you've got some of these guys. As the season goes on, you're probably not going to see as many of these upper power five quarterbacks in that top five, because as you said earlier, that's when you're going to get into your MACtion and your conference games for the group of five, and you're going to have much more difficult games for your Ohio States, Alabamas, Oklahoma State. So
Yep, 100%, and that will be a dramatic shift as we get into week 4, 5, 6. So yeah, Bryce Young against UL Monroe. You just expect them to get it from Saban this week in practice, and you just kind of know they're going to come out and crush UL Monroe as bad as they can beat them. So the spread on that one is 49.5 with the over-under of 60, which doesn't leave many points for UL Monroe. About 5.25 points is what UL Monroe's projected. So Alabama, all their players are rated pretty highly this week, but receiver still is kind of questionable because they just didn't perform very well last week. One of the surprises, and just watching him play this year, Spencer Sanders looks freaking great. Not only does he look super quick, like the ball comes out quick, he's just seemingly improved a lot. We'll see as they go into conference play, and the Big 12 is a lot better at defense than they were 4 or 5 years ago. So we'll see how Spencer Sanders continues to produce in fantasy. But the last 2 weeks, he had 58 fantasy points and 32 for an average of 45. He's playing against Arkansas Pine Bluff, so there's no spread. But you just hope he gets his points, and you figure he will before they go to the backups there, which is the only concern with Spencer Sanders. But I think they're going to want to keep his hot streak rolling along.
All right, number 4, you've got Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. I'm hoping that this is going to be the game where he's going to blow up. The first 2 weeks have been all right. I mean, he's looked good, but definitely have not been games that are going to be winning or performances are going to win or lose you a fantasy game. Probably games that are performances are going to lose you a fantasy game more than win, because you're expecting that Tennessee offense is going to blow up. Yep. And it just hasn't really done that as far as his stats are concerned. What do you think about Hendon Hooker? Obviously, you think highly of him if you've got him at QB4. What are your thoughts on Hendon Hooker?
It's a potential look-ahead game. It's actually on Late Kick. It's one of Josh Pate's best bets. Is the other side is taking Akron and the minus or plus 47.5, just because Tennessee is going to be looking ahead at Florida next week is who they host, and they're coming off a big, tight win in overtime against Pitt. But I like Hendon Hooker a lot. It's a tune-up game, feel-good game. Get a couple long touchdown passes to Tillman, and then he'll probably be out of the game, I imagine, somewhere in the third quarter.
All right, then it looks like probably the most difficult matchup in those top 5 is going to be Caleb Williams USC against Fresno State.
Heck yeah, that's going to be a shootout. That's one of the biggest over-under matchups this week. 71.5. I think it might be the biggest in terms of total points scored projected. So we've got that leaves USC basically 42-29, beating out Fresno State. So there's plenty of fantasy points to be had there on both teams. So
I'll tell you,
Caleb Williams should play into the fourth.
If you haven't seen Fresno State, they are a deep team at wide receiver. That's one of those teams where you think it's going to be Jalen Cropper, but their team is so deep at wide receiver. They have got so many weapons that it's going to be a shootout, because you can't cover them all. You cannot cover them all.
Yep. All right, let's move to running back, as I'm fighting away coughing here. I'm just gonna take a sip of this cold coffee that's here, because that's all I've got left. But Bijan Robinson, like we mentioned earlier, issues at quarterback, injury issues. UTSA is a really solid group of 5 opponent. If you haven't seen them play, they're solid. The spread is just 13.5 at home for Texas. And it would probably be less if the third string quarterback ends up starting there. So I expect Bijan Robinson to be heavily featured in this game, catching the ball, running the ball. Wouldn't be surprised if he got, high 20s and touches this week. But love Bijan as our RB1 this week.
Yeah, I think that UTSA definitely has the ability to keep that game score high. Frank Harris is an underrated quarterback in fantasy football for UTSA. And that game is probably going to be a lot more of a shootout than people would expect, just because of the injuries on the Texas side and just not a lot of people outside of college fantasy really knowing about UTSA.
So did you see last week how many catches our RB2 had?
I did not, but I'm sure I'm going to find out right now.
14 catches last week for Evan Hull. Yeah, more catches than carries, I believe. And Northwestern's got a great matchup this week, and there's no spread, but I expect Hull to get another big performance. He's got 70. He's averaging 35 fantasy points a game right now.
Wow, my goodness!
In 2 games against Nebraska, and I forget who they played last week, but yeah. Great matchup. Easy.
This might be the game to get those points out of him because they're playing a complete money game right now. So who knows if he's going to be able to keep that up when they get into conference? But this is going to be playing against SIU. That's going to be a one for them to go and just screen pass and little flares out of the backfield to him the whole time.
RB3, we've got another guy that's expected to get a bunch of catches, and Sean Tucker. I think week in, week out, he's going to be just one of the stars. He's someone that if you can target to trade for him, his value is just going to continue to go up. They play Purdue at home this week at noon. Just super consistent so far. Week 1, 27 points. Week 2, 33 points. And it's projected to be a really tight game. I looked at the line last night, and it was a pick'em game, so should be about 60 points scored, and Tucker's gonna get his against Purdue.
It's crazy watching how Syracuse has changed their offensive style. You don't normally see that a lot in college football, where you go from pass happy. You could not stop their wide receivers to now being a run oriented offense. Where they've got a lot more coming out of the backfield. It's interesting seeing the same coach. I mean, if you have a coaching change, that's something that you could project. But when you're talking about the same coach that was 4 and 5 wide all game to be in a run heavy offense, that's very interesting.
Yep, it is interesting. We've got Braylon Allen, RB4 for Wisconsin. Pretty easy start there. Another weak opponent. They're projected to win 42-5. So I'm sure he'll get his before he comes out of the game, and I don't expect him to play the full game.
All right, and then last but not least, you got Lou Nichols the third from Central Michigan.
Sweet Lou.
That's right. Again, if this was a game that was in conference even, or if he was playing a Power 5, he might not be at 5, but they're playing a money game for them. Which, if it's a money game for Central Michigan, they're playing a very, very weak opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. And, after week 1, what they did to Oklahoma State in terms of being able to put up points, still being able to run the ball, Lou Nichols is just, you start him every week, no matter who they play almost. And potentially it is just no matter who they play, you got to start him.
All right, so that's the top 5. So you're going to be scrolling on down here to wide receivers. Wide receivers, again, we have a lot of guys that are in the Power 5 conferences for the same reason with the quarterbacks. There's a lot of money games here, a lot of out-of-conference games. Let's go to your number 1. Who is it and why?
Jordan Addison, USC. We've talked about this game. It's going to be a high-scoring, one of the highest-scoring games of the day, and Addison has just taken over as wide receiver 1. It was interesting beginning of the year seeing all those transfers, Mario Williams and others going in there competing against other good receivers that already existed on the roster. But Addison's just the man. Like he's really good, and he's going to get deep shots every game, and he's also going to put up a decent number of catches and get his share of targets. So he's got I think he's averaging 26.2 fantasy points per game with the highest scoring game potentially of the day. I like him a lot there. And at wide receiver 2, we got the second highest projected scoring game of the day. Rashee Rice for SMU at Maryland. Rice has come out as the clear number 1 receiver for SMU, 27 fantasy points per game, and super consistent, 26.6 week 1, 27.7 week 2, and he's a candidate who's got a really a high floor. And he'll have his blow-up games where he'll just kill it, but he's not going to be someone, or very unlikely to be someone, who ever has like 2 catches for 25 yards.
Yeah.
He's just been killing it.
Fully expect that game to be a shootout. Tagovailoa had a great game last week for Maryland. I expect that it's going to be a pass-happy game, which works out well when you have a receiver like that, because that means he's going to still be in the game and still having to, go possession for possession with the other team that's going to be out there trying to score high as well.
A former Group of 5 member comes in at number 3, Jacob Cowing for Arizona. He transferred to Arizona in the offseason. You're like, oh, I wonder how he's going to perform against the top-level talent. Well, he's performed great at Arizona, and he's the clear go-to guy for an offense that's doing way better than people expected. They're playing North Dakota State, late night game, 11 p.m. start Eastern, and no spread on this game, but he's averaging 25 a game, and I don't see any reason why that would slow down against North Dakota State. And then wide receiver 4, we've got Tillman for Tennessee. He's averaging 18 a game so far. We haven't seen the best of Tillman yet. Like, Tennessee just hasn't, they haven't had the easy games. This is a tune-up for Akron. Again, I think he's going to get his early and then get out of the game and get ready for Florida next week. And then at wide receiver 5, Tank Dell for Houston, playing against a surprisingly decent Kansas team. This should be another shootout in favor of Houston. I think the score based on the over-under is around 36-26. So Dell will get his averaging 18 a game. Haven't seen his best game yet for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things, let's go back to Tillman real quick. If you would have asked me who I was upset with, who I was mad at after week 1, it would have been Tillman. You come out there, he was a high draft pick, and the ball just didn't go his way. It wasn't much he could do. They were just in the game. He was out quickly. There wasn't much he could do in that game. So to be able to see him have a bounce back game last week and show, hey, look, this is a guy that deserved to get that high draft pick. Really glad about that. And if you go to Kansas, I saw an interesting note this week. If you look at Kansas, one of the things you have to pay attention to in college football is where the coaches go.
Yep.
What was a program like previously, and what's going on with them now? Look at Buffalo in the last couple of years, had some great offensive talent. Their coach goes to Kansas. Now Kansas is doing well. So that coach has brought his system that he had in Buffalo that produced Jared Patterson over to Kansas, and now Kansas has a strong running back there. So keep your eye on Kansas because of the success their coach had at a previous stop.
Yeah, Devin Neal, we've got him as one of our top, 30, 40 starts this week. Absolutely. And he's averaging 24 a game, and that might not slow down at all throughout this season. So that's a great one there.
So that's our top 5 at each position. But you know what comes next? If you're out there and you've been listening to the podcast, you know that the next thing up is B-Mac's brisket lock. B-Mac is a connoisseur of the cooked meats, and he is so confident in his brisket lock. He would probably bet his plate of brisket that this guy's going to have a good week. B-Mac, who outside the top 5 is B-Mac's brisket lock for college fantasy football week 3?
This segment kills me every time you have this great introduction. I'm thinking, dang, maybe I should smoke a brisket this weekend. And that's been a while. It's been a while for me, but it's football season. It's time. Maybe this is the weekend. So brisket lock of the week. I've got Marquez Cooper, running back, Kent State. We talked about Kent State earlier. He's averaging, less than 10 fantasy points per game-ish. Had the really difficult schedule, but they get a break from at Washington, at Oklahoma. Now they're playing Long Island, and they're finally at home. So Colin Schlee is a great start. Marquez Cooper is a great start. Cephas is a great start. Really, now's the time to have him bust out, be that RB1, and see how he does. Both the brisket locks have crushed it so far, so we'll see how Marquez Cooper does this week.
All right, there you go. Marquez Cooper, BMAX brisket lock for week 3. Let's see if he can keep his plate of brisket this week. All right, so now we want to transfer over to Discord. CFBDynasty.com has got a growing Discord channel. Every week we ask people for their comments and their participation and their questions. So BMAC, you've got a couple of things lined up from the Discord that we want to talk about. Let's head on over there. Let's see what we want to talk about this week.
JFresh33, he says, looking into the future, which quarterback has a better remainder to the season? We've got Jurkovec at Boston College, Schlee at Kent, theme of the show today with Kent State, or Peyton Thorne for Michigan State. For me, I think the answer is pretty obvious. I'm not angry with Jurkovec. I do have Jurkovec in our main league, and he's struggled, and I'm more disappointed with Jurkovec than anything else. Colin Schlee, though, he's the clear answer to me. I like Peyton Thorne. I like what Michigan State's going to do. I think he's the second one on this list. But I will easily take Schlee and Kent as they get into some action.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I would rank them exactly the same way you just did. Schlee number 1, Thorne 2, and then Jurkovec as 3. I think that now that Kent they've survived, once they get past Georgia, if he gets out of that game and he's not on a stretcher,
that's a major key. Good call.
If he can get through that Georgia game and still be standing, I think that he could have a blow up end of the year.
Yes, just be healthy. That's a very good call. All right, so we've got Tiger Turf. He's one of the newer members in the Discord. So need advice on a starting quarterback this week, and I will take this moment to say, like Zach Tao and I, every either Friday night or Saturday, we'll ping everybody and take start-sit questions, and Tiger Turf appropriately put this in the start-sit, but we're just adding it to the pod this week. So who would you start, Matt? Each of these, I'll say, are in our top 10 starts of the week. So I don't think he can go wrong with any of them. We've got Will Rogers at LSU. Mississippi State's a 3-point favorite there. The projected ending score is about 28-25 based on the over-under. Sam Hartman against Liberty, or Spencer Sanders against Arkansas Pine Bluff.
If I had to rank those, I would say Sam Hartman, in my mind, is the number 1, specifically because Liberty, even though Liberty is on the bottom end of the group of 5, I don't think Liberty is just a complete pushover for a team like Wake. I think Sam Hartman is going to come in feeling like he's still got some stuff to prove after not being sure if he was even going to play this year. I think he proved last week that he is the same quarterback that we all expected he was going to be. I think there is the best chance that Sam Hartman is going to actually play the vast majority of that game. So that's why I would go with Sam Hartman. Spencer Sanders, I think, could be out early. And he might be out early and not get a whole lot of passing yards. I think Arkansas Pine Bluff is just going to get exactly what you'd expect out of that game. Arkansas Pine Bluff is probably just going to get destroyed. You could have a game where Spencer Sanders blows up in the first half and then he's out in the second, or it could all be rushing touchdowns. I think that Will Rogers against LSU, if this was an end-of-season game, it always seems like the SEC, when you get to the end of the year, you've got some crazy game that's like 60-59 in the SEC where both teams are just blowing up. But early season, I don't know if that's what's going to happen in the SEC. So I would say if this was my roster without hesitation, I would personally go with Sam Hartman first.
Oh, so if this was my roster, I would have so much hesitation. I would argue all week long trying to figure out, all right, which one of these guys is the best start. I get you for sure. It's just hard to sit Spencer Sanders, who's averaged 45 a game so far in 2 games. And yeah, he runs the ball. He throws the ball, of course, as the quarterback. But he's a great running quarterback. So it doesn't take long for him to put up points in a hurry. So we'll see. There's not a big gap between these quarterbacks in our rankings. We might have, Will Rogers at 9, Spencer Sanders at 3, and Hartman at 6. There's not a huge gap there. They're all
Yeah.
favorable starts. So no matter, and that's really what I want CFB Dynasty to be as we continue to push data and launch our algorithm and all that stuff in the coming weeks. It's a tool to help you figure out which player you want to start. It's not necessarily, a prediction, but it's based on the math. It's hard to sit Spencer Sanders, but they're all really good starts this week.
I could tell you the couple questions or comments I would have to Tiger Turf is if you've got those 3 quarterbacks, I want to know who else is in his league and what their quarterbacks are. Because if he's got 3 guys at that level, my goodness, that is a deep, deep team. And like you said, you could just throw a dart at the board and you start any one of those guys. That's a great problem to have because I don't think any one of those quarterbacks is going to have a bad week. I think they're all going to have great weeks. I just think Sam Hartman probably has the best chance of having more playing time in that game. Yep. But if you couldn't go wrong starting any one of those 3 guys. I think that he's got a great problem to have right there.
Yep. So, and then the last thing is we've got Tar Heel Bum, who I've interacted with for years on, with the CFB Dynasty site via email, via all kinds of things. So he's got a question, just looking for some feedback on his roster, where he's at. So let's break down his roster. I'll put it up on the screen. He sent over some screenshots via the Discord, and I know it might be a little bit difficult to see, so I'm going to read them out. He's 0-2, little concerned. He's in a 10-team keeper league, so youth matters in here. You want to, typically in a keeper league, you want to have a nice percentage of, younger players and, seniors and juniors who could go to the draft at any point or graduate, whatever. You want to have a healthy mix there. For long-term success. Totally in those years where you have the roster to make a push for the championship, you can totally get rid of some of those young assets and go all in on a year. I love to do that. It's won me plenty of money in other big leagues that are really competitive before. But in this case, let's take a look. So his starting lineup, he's got Caleb Williams. He's a top 5 start. He's got Tank Bigsby, who's got a really difficult matchup this week. Tank is he is the Auburn offense, so he could be someone that's going to just get a touchdown or 2 every game, but I don't see a lot of points being scored there. Tank is such a good player, really difficult to sit. But he's also got Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama, who hasn't put up the points. You can see on his Fantrax screenshot here, 12.7 fantasy points per game year to date. So that we would expect to go up quite a bit. A.D. Mitchell from Georgia, who's hurt, and Bradley, and then A.T. Perry at receiver, and Brock Bowers at tight end. So
I'll tell you, Bradley's going to have a tough matchup this week because NC State's getting back 2 of their key components. Shaheem Battle is one of them that's coming back at DB. They're also getting back one of their all-world linebackers. So their defense is going to be at full health. NC State's got one of the best linebacking cores in the country. So I think Texas Tech is going to have a little bit of a problem in their passing game. I would still start him because it's a Texas Tech offense. But I would, if he has a little bit of a down week this week, it's going to be because they're going to have a defense that's going to be back at full health.
He's not a top 50 start for me. I don't like the matchup. I want to see more before I put him in a starting lineup. They really, even with Miles Bryce, which the whole community was big on him going into the season because of the position he played for the offense that he was in and the new coaching staff, etc. Like, it was set up to be great. No one has taken off with a big percentage of target share or anything there. They've all kind of spread it out kind of evenly. So looking at the bench there, he's got some youth with Raleek Brown. Zach Evans, ooh, that is tough to sit. And Devin Neal from Kansas. I think Copeland, Ducking, Burden at receiver are better starts.
Does he not have
Does he not have
does he not have a flex in this league?
Doesn't seem like it.
That's tough.
So, but instead of Mitchell for Georgia or Bradley for Texas Tech, I would like the upside better of a Burden or a Copeland or a Ducking. I think two of those three would be better starts, and I think all three of them are in our top 50, whereas the other two aren't. The other guy potentially would be Brew McCoy, who looked pretty good. He's averaging 8 fantasy points per game.
And I would say if his league is 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex, right now he's got 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers. Based on that roster he has, I would, if the flex is in there, I would go 3 running backs, 2 wide receivers, because it looks like his depth and his strength is at that running back core.
Yep, you got to start Neal or Evans if that's the case. And I might start one of those two over Tank, but again, that's a hard one to sit. But anyways, thanks for the question there. Tar Heel Bum, always appreciate you and enjoy talking with all y'all on the Discord. That's been a fun addition to the college football season.
And if you guys are not up there on the Discord, what are you waiting for? Get your butt up there. Get on the CFB Dynasty Discord. Subscribe to the CFB Dynasty website so you can get this information, because all we're doing is touching on the top 5s of positions. If you're in a 12-team league, most likely we have not touched on anybody that's on your roster, or maybe just a player or two. Because we've only really talked about 15 to 20 guys on this podcast. You need to get up there, be able to do your research, and be able to really see who you want to start. So you want to get up and be on CFBDynasty.com, subscribe there, get into the Discord, be involved there, ask questions, and get your question, whether it's going to be on this podcast or on the live broadcast that Brian is doing with Zach Tao. Be involved and help take your team to the next level.
Yep, we just want to have fun with you guys, build a great community. That's the goal, because we love college football, and it's more fun to complain and do things together. So we appreciate it.
All right, B-Mac. So outside of the Discord and outside of here, how can people get a hold of you during the week? How can they pay attention to what's going on in the life of B-Mac?
Yeah, at CFB Dynasty. I don't do much posting, but if you want to, for whatever reason, on the personal Twitter, it's at BC McElfresh. But yeah, man, how about you?
So you can, you see I've got my name down here. It says hashtag Team InSim. I am one half of InSymmetry Creations. We're a content creation collective with myself and Steph Cannon. We write comics. We do articles. We do panel hosting. We do MCing. Last week I was at Daytona Beach Comic-Con. This week I'm in my hometown. I'm at Ocala Comic-Con at the World Equestrian Center. Going to be the biggest Ocala Comic-Con ever. They're taking up one of the entire convention center buildings out there. I'll be doing some panels on Saturday morning and Sunday morning. Otherwise, I'll be at our booth. We're going to be at, I think it's S13. So if you come out to Ocala Comic-Con and you want to talk some college fantasy football, look for the dude in the top hat. That's going to be me. And we can talk some college fantasy. On social media, you can go to at Dr. Anguish if you want to get to me personally, or you can go to /InSim on Facebook, InSim Creations on Twitter, or InSymmetry Creations on Instagram, or you can go to InSymmetryCreations.com to the website, and you can see everything that we do as InSymmetry Creations.
Heck yeah, man. Thanks. Well, it's been fun. I think we're going to have a great weekend of fantasy football, but hopefully some of these players take off for me. I've had in the home league, I've had a rough start to the season. Matchups have been not great for me.
Well, I tell you, one of the things, if we go back to when we talked about what are we mad at, one of the things I am not mad about is parity. I am somebody who always roots for the underdog. I love seeing smaller teams jump up, and I love the fact that you've seen so many games to start this year where teams that were just expected on paper to just run away with it, they're in the top 4 in college football every year, that have struggled. I love seeing the Marshalls and the Appalachian states getting a chance to get some national press. I love it, and I hope that it continues.
Yep, and I'm going up against the infamous Uncle Joe this week.
So Uncle Joe, you never know what you're going to get. He is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get from him. Sometimes it's going to be sane. Sometimes it's going to be insane. But it's still Uncle Joe.
If only you guys knew. It's so funny when I hear a couple Discord people ask about Uncle Joe and what he's doing. But anyways,
we're making him famous. We're making him famous, but his craziness is making him famous, so we can make him even more famous.
We'll get him on a shirt this year for sure.
That'd be the top selling shirt for CFB is going to be the Uncle Joe shirt.
Oh, I would not doubt it.
All right, guys. So we've come to the end of the broadcast. We hope you've enjoyed this, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on any of the streaming platforms. Hope you come back next week where we talk about what we liked in week 3, what we're looking forward to in week 4, and all the other stuff. Looking for BMAX brisket lock in week 4. We hope you guys go up and join the Discord. Go subscribe to CFBDynasty.com. My name is Matt Knowles. That guy over there is BMAC, the founder of CFBDynasty.com. We thank you guys for coming out. See ya.